Well, this is odd. Hello, my name is Sam Bain and I am the director of the film Coin. Now, Coin was a film which was supposed to take place last month for production, but unfortunately because of the coronavirus we were unable to do that. So today I have decided to show you the whole process from research to idea generation and pre-production. How to prep for a production. Let's get into it. Sorry, what I bumped into you then. So Coin was supposed to take place in Neath Patel, but I didn't want to travel far, like New York or Kansas City or Missouri. I decided to stay here in Neath Patel, so we have our own authentic style to when it comes to a thriller film, a mafia film, a shooter, quite like this. The story was about someone called Leon Andrews, a hired assassin, with his pal David Mawson. These two would get into business with a mafia family called the Maguire family. Now, the Maguire family are big, ferocious people led by one man and one man only, and that is Tony Maguire. David Mawson was the one to bring aside to Leon to say that this will be the moneymaker for their future. They do this job, they could get inducted into a family, which would be the Maguires, and then they would make millions beyond belief. Now Tony now is reading up the profile about Leon Andrews, saying that he's got a very good record of kills and assassinations to his name. Now he can be a deadly asset to his family. Now Tony sends Leon and David onto a mission to find information about a coin. This is the story of the film, of course. Coin. This rare coin is being bought out by someone called Frank Palmer. He is, of course, the leader of the Palmer family, and Tony and Frank have had a feud in the past. Once they were friends when they were younger in another family. Frank betrayed Tony, shooting him in the chest twice, leaving him for dead, only for Tony to be saved by a worker nearby. As Tony reminisces about that, he sends David and Leon on their way to find out these three people that have information about this coin. And these three people are as follows. After a flashback sequence between Tony and Frank, Tony decides to send Leon and David away onto the mission where they have to look for two people in an apartment to find out information about the dealer of this coin and what name will be brought up to bring them closer to this coin. Now this would be an intense scene between Leon, David, Chris and John. They ask first about the location of the coin, but there's nothing. So to get something out of John, David eventually shoots Chris in the chest and making John look in shock. John starts to shake and starts to panic and forgets what he says all the time after a question is asked by him. Eventually, Leon then shoots John in the leg, and then eventually something would be given up. Who has inside information about this dealer? After careful back and forth, Leon and David eventually kill John, both putting 6 bullets into them each. This would be quite a surprise, as Jimmy, their roommate, would kick the door down and try shoot at Leon and David, only then to find out that the background there are bullet holes everywhere, meaning that Jimmy missed every shot. It took 1 bullet each from Leon and David to kill Jimmy, and now they have 3 dead bodies in the room. So they decided to call Tony and ask about what to do with the bodies, and Tony specifically says to dump them in the lake. So by that, eventually they would take the bodies, but they didn't listen properly, because what they said What Tony said specifically there was in the lake. Now Leon and David, they put the bodies by the lake. So eventually when they come home or go to the clubhouse, they see the news and there's been 3 dead bodies found by the lake. This sends Tony into pandemonium and starts shouting at everyone, starts aiming everything at David all the time, and this really puts David on edge. But then Tony is calmed down by Leon after he said there is indeed a 4th person in this equation. They said that this person was called Dan, and Dan could be used as a potential bait to get this coin from the dealer before Frank gets there. Tony sends David and Leon on a mission to find this Dan person, and Tony specifically said that if David messes up one more time, then he will be joining those 3 bodies in the lake. David is annoyed at this point and goes into the car with Leon to talk about some stuff about Tony. And as David was just about to say that he's had enough of Tony and what he could do, suddenly there's a nudge from Leon and the person is there. The 4th person in this conundrum has been found, and Dan is there waiting outside a building, but he spots out David and Leon very quickly as he's looking straight at them and they're looking back. Dan sprints off and then he goes into a chase with David and Leon. Now David goes off set for a little bit and we don't know where he's gone. This leads to a big chase, a big sprint by Dan, and then David goes off the camera, nowhere to be seen for a good bit, while Leon is chasing Dan. Leon trips onto the floor, but he pulls his gun out to try and shoot him. But as he's about to shoot him, out in the corner, on the left hand side, there is David. David tackles Dan down. They tie him up and they put him into the trunk. This would cut forward 6 hours of the film. Once Dan is taken out of the trunk, he pleads for his life. He says, please, no, don't do this to me, please. But then eventually, Leon and David, they finally get their answer. They find the location. It's an abandoned warehouse in Britain Ferry. By how quick he answered this, they decide to let him go, let him live. But he wants to be seen by the big boss first, by Tony Maguire. Dan explains that this singular coin is worth £230 million, which is absurd for a coin. He tells Tony that there's been a deal agreed and that they are going to do this deal at that abandoned warehouse in Britain Ferry. Tony then remembers that in their clubhouse they've got an old printer which they can print off as much money as they can. So what they do, they load up the printer, they copy everything, they print everything out on the computer, put it into the printer, and then they got £230 million there. This took around 5 hours to get this money printed off and put into a briefcase. To be exact, at 11:32 they completed it. Everyone is suited up, ready to go. Only one person has to stay behind with Dan and ask David. Tony tells him that this is the kind of demotion he was hoping for, and David is very frustrated and starts shouting in Tony's face. He's lucky to be alive because of Tony. David is absolutely furious about this, and if he starts yelling more at Tony, then he will be on the verge of being cut from this group. After everyone goes in their cars to this meetup, David takes Dan's phone and then he makes an important phone call with that phone. It is now 11:58 and it is nearly time for this negotiation to go ahead. Everyone is reminded to put their mobile phones off, just in case if any of the police show up at all. When they're walking through, one by one, they see the dealer. He's only known as William. Tony negotiates with the dealer and he says £230 million is in this briefcase. And he checks the briefcase over, slides it across the floor, and then William opens it, and it's all the money you could imagine just in one briefcase. All fake, of course. William goes into his pocket, which would be Bashir, his jacket pocket, and then he would reveal the coin and he would pass it to Tony when suddenly a door opens at the other side of the room. What could this be? It's Frank Palmer. Frank Palmer has busted this negotiation up, which, to be fair, it was his to start off with. After a back and forth between the two mafia bosses, Frank explains that he had a certain phone call off someone, and lo and behold, who was behind him after all this time? It was Dan. Dan escaped the warehouse, but Dan has got all blood all over him. Meaning, did he fight David? Is David dead? Is David kidnapped? Leon is in shock at this point because he's worried that his long-term friend, something bad has happened to him, we presume. Tony is irate at this point and suddenly pulls his gun out and shoots Dan 3 times, very quickly, very rapidly, onto the floor, dead. But as he is shooting Dan, Frank pulls his gun out and shoots Tony Maguire, ending a rivalry which was 20 years in the making. Ended just like that. But no coin. When Leon drives back to the clubhouse, he can see that the ropes have been untied, there's blood everywhere, he has no clue what has happened during this time. It's an absolute bloodbath there at this present time. This makes Leon drink and pass out during the night. The next day it's in the afternoon and Leon is still drinking at this time. But what he doesn't remember is that when he walked into the warehouse, he took everyone's phones. So he's got Tony Maguire's phone, who is off. He puts the phone on and then he sees that a message from Frank has come through. Now you're dead. Okay. He throws the phone onto the floor just like that, and then he decides to just continue drinking. But then suddenly the phone goes again. The phone is now ringing. He doesn't know what to do. After some music is playing, it's suddenly cut. Leon then decides to pick up the phone. And he picks up the phone. And it's complete silence. There is nothing to be heard at all. After all that, Leon then hangs up and tries to continue drinking. Frank on the other end seems a bit shocked. Who the hell was that? No phone was found, but someone picked up the phone. Who could it be? But then suddenly the phone gets a call back to Frank, and it's Tony's phone. Frank picks it up. Frank says hello, and then Leon says,
"You called this number on a dead guy's phone. Who are you?"
Frank talks to Leon and says that he has got nothing left now because the person who let him into a family is now gone. There's no sign of David anymore. He doesn't know what to do. So he thinks if he's looking for a job, there is always space open in the Palmer family. Surprisingly, Leon agrees. Is it just something to get revenge on? So Leon gets suited up, as you do, and then he decides to go to Frank's hideout. He goes to his office. It's an empty place. This clubhouse is. There's no one there at all. Only one room has people in it. Or one person, I guess. And that will be Frank Palmer in his office as Leon opens the door. he sees Frank Palmer there in his chair, smoking a big cigar. After a back and forth confrontation, asking why did Frank kill Tony there, what fueled him, suddenly a third voice is heard, and it's not what you would expect. It's David. What David done, he called Frank for help, and he gave up the idea to what Tony had planned. David is a snake. We all thought at this point that David was either kidnapped or dead at this point. There was nowhere of him to be seen. But it turns out he is the one. He's the one behind all this. David says to Leon that he did this out of his own good. He did try explaining this to Leon in the car before Dan came into the equation. David then calls him a liar, and then he gets his gun out. And now the two have a standoff between each other, with Frank Palmer in the middle. David then gives him the option: join this family or die. Leon thinks about this for a couple of seconds before realising that a globe on the desk, a metal globe. So what Leon does, he quickly picks up the metal globe, and David shoots at it by accident, thinking it's going to be something there instead. But no, David shoots the globe, deflects, but then the metal globe is thrown at David's face, and then eventually Leon pulls Frank around and got him at gunpoint. This is potentially a lose-lose situation now for David, where he can't shoot his new boss and he can't find a way through Leon. But then Frank makes the ultimate sacrifice. Frank mouths these words: shoot through me. David shoots Frank 6 times. Unfortunately for him, Frank dies onto the floor. There is no movement from him at all. Frank is presumed dead, but now Leon is now buried under Frank. So while David's trying to pull Frank off, which he eventually does, Leon has his gun out ready, and then he shoots David 6 times himself until David drops onto the floor, dead. It turns out, by the fracas between David and Leon and Frank, that Leon was actually shot 3 times, but he still lived because where he was shot on the body. Leon gets up, he realises on David's chest is the coin that everyone's been grasping about. David takes his coin and leaves the warehouse. No one is there, so Leon can just get away with no problem. So as Leon is leaving the clubhouse, he is not standing up straight and he's drooling everywhere, and then eventually he passes out in the middle of the road when ambulance is called at that point. Could this be potential of a sequel? And that is the film of Coin. Here is how I broke down the story from scratch. Started off the first part, research. Now if you are going to start off a video project like this, you've got to think of the genre of film that you want to aim for. The genre will help plan different assets for your project. So my genre for this film was aimed to be the thriller genre. Now I had to look at famous films within that genre from the last couple of years and throughout time as well. So I looked at films such as Joker, The Departed, Inglourious Basterds and Prisoners. These films and many other films got picked for this for several factors. Number 1, how memorable was this film to the audience? Just those 4 films alone had different time frames of when the film was based upon. Joker was based upon 1981. Inglourious Basterds was based around 1941 to 1944, really aiming for that World War II preference. While The Departed and Prisoners were based on modern day at that present time. So The Departed was made in 2006, while Prisoners was made in 2013. If I'm inspired by the film Joker or Inglourious Basterds, I would have to try and find a way to make mine more modern as I feel that my project would be better if it was set in modern times. And number 3, geographical preference. Now, the films I've just mentioned are in the United States and Germany. Showing that, I think I'd rather decide to bring something to South Wales instead. Probably more within the Neath Talbot area for this project. Next, I would look at primary research. Primary research is mainly people like credible sources, like pioneers, like Quentin Tarantino or Martin Scorsese, or it's audience research. Next, I would look at primary research. Primary research is probably one of the most important parts of research in this project. It's where you get first-person opinions on something which can be credible to how your project pans out. Based off what I was aiming for this film, it was between the age gap of 16 to 24. So I set up a survey on typeform.com so I could discuss this with the 16 to 24 year old age gap and discuss any feedback for how this particular project would work. This questionnaire helped me draft up my idea even more to what I could use for this project. And here are some of the questions and responses I had for this project to see what will be the complete outcome for it. Are you a fan of thriller movies? 26 people said yes, while 6 people said no. Have you seen any of these movies around this genre, which I will throw the list of movies on screen now? And it turns out the 3 best scored movies in the thriller genre are Joker, The Dark Knight and Pulp Fiction. These 3 movies helped me choose the idea of what I could go for in this movie. So for Joker, I could go for the colour grading of this film. See how I turned it to a more maroon colour around this room? Okay, back to normal. I could get some elements of the story from The Dark Knight, where The Dark Knight had a very strong plot and how a Batman thriller should be like.
They'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Understand. You have all these rules and you think they'll save you.
And in Pulp Fiction, I like the element of what a type of mafia film thriller would bring into this genre, and I would like to add some elements of my own, inspired by Pulp Fiction, into my project.
And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
The next part of research would be secondary research. Secondary research lets you look at films, YouTube, TV, books, magazines, everything possible to help me create such a film like this. And my main goal looking at the project was looking at directors of how they filmed their projects. So the people I was looking at were Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese and Wes Anderson. These 3 helped me a lot with the project, with what I want to do with shot types. Shot types are very important within this film. Wes Anderson has a fantastic drawback of shots for his project. And Martin Scorsese with the use of audio within his film, using the use of silence in his project. We can point this out in The Departed, for example. Tarantino uses fantastic shots within this movie, such as the famous point of view shot, which can be utilised to make a character look menacing. I'm planning to do the right thing to that character who is in that position, looking up at this character, either dead or alive, of course. He uses these point of view shots in films such as Django, Reservoir Dogs, Inglourious Basterds, and his most famous work, probably in Pulp Fiction, where just like in Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs, They open a trunk to the point of view shot, which, in Tarantino's words now, the trunk shot. 360 cycling is a shot which goes round something repeatedly, showing multiple factors. This could be used for many things. It could be what is being circled. It could be what is being circled. Who are the people in this circle? And would this singular moment where everyone is around, let's say a table like they are in Reservoir Dogs, would that be the most pivotal part of the whole film? Because in Reservoir Dogs they did it as a meet-up of some sort before doing a big bank job. Because these scenes alone can decide negotiation, interrogation to its peak. Well, like I said about Reservoir Dogs, if they're getting food, go ahead. Before they decide on something, of course. McDonald's or Burger King. Like, come on now. And probably the best known Tarantino shot of all, and this is a weird one, foot shots. Tarantino, in some of his biggest films, have always had foot shots within that project. Nearly every film that Tarantino has done, it has involved some sort of feet. Whether it's outside of a car, or it's dead bodies, Tarantino uses these foot shots to a variety. Away from feet vids now, and I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite directors of all time, and that is Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese has directed some of the biggest thrillers of all time. Over the last 30, 40, 50 years even, Martin Scorsese has always pulled out the bag of a thriller. Some of these films include the greats of Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, The Departed, and his most recent hit, The Irishman.
You're done? I'll rip your fucking head off! Hey!
And during some of these films, Martin Scorsese has blessed us with his use of audio. His audio defines a scene. It's when this audio goes silent, that's when you signal the most pivotal part of this movie. That, of course, could be someone's death, or it could be two people coming together on a phone call, which you'd never expect to happen. This is an example of what I mean about Martin Scorsese's work. This is a remake of The Departed, of What I Done.
Yeah.
You called this number on a dead guy's phone. Who are you?
Now we move on to idea generation, and first up we're going to be talking about mood boards and mind maps. Let's go. Now these will help me think about what's the best option for me and what could be the best plot, which could fulfill every character's story. You could add many features into this project. You could add character design, you can add location, you can add the plot, you can add your inspirations even, like I have for sure, with The Departed, Joker, Casino Royale as well. I like the scene on Casino Royale at the opening part of that film where Bond is fighting someone and he has an interrogation scene with a former MI6 agent.
Second is... Yes. Considerably.
You could even plan for sure your potential endings for your project. What do you want your ending to be like? Do you want a massive plot twist, or do you want straight up superhero ending? Next up is job roles. Now if I get my job roles up here for this production, I need to consider some people that are both going to be actors and crew members for this project. Obviously, to start off, I will class myself as the director of this movie, as this is my idea I want to put ahead to my actors and my crew members. Next up, I would have to consider cameramen. I don't mind taking on 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 4 jobs, 5 jobs for this project, because we got an insufficient amount of people for this project. I decided to hire 2 cameramen for this project, and they would be Ethan Beale and Dan Thomas. What I've seen during my time when I was in college are probably 2 of the best cinematographers I've seen. How they film a project is amazing, and to have their ideas about shots and where to put them is brilliant. So I would feel that Dan Thomas and Ethan Beale would suit well in that position. Obviously, as I will explain later on, Ethan Beale has another occupation in this project, so I feel Dan Thomas could do some of this on his own as well when Ethan is acting, but we will have to wait and see. For audio mixer, it would be Tom Evans. He can record audio from a scene, record ambience around the area, which I feel would be pivotal for this film, because I'd rather get audio of the area than rather get audio from online, like you get from these sound effect websites, for example. They're not really great. It's not the ones that you really want at that point. And for other roles for the film, it is covered by me and any other volunteer at that time. Now if this was a movie hitting the cinemas, obviously I wouldn't be the person going round to every specific job role and completing that task at the time. I would have to be director and stay as director, or I could be producer at the same time. Some people do that sometimes. But I would, if it was a proper film by a production company, I would have to get my own lighting manager, my own runner, my own hair designer for these projects. So I see that these characters have the perfect appearance for this film. Now we move on to pre-production. Pre-production is all the preparation going into the actual project itself. So I would feel that this production would need to be backed up a lot at this point. Now at the beginning of this video, I told you my story for this film. That would be called a story synopsis. It is a rundown on what the story is going to be about, where it has 5 achieving goals: opening, build-up, problem, resolution, and ending. Normally if you were in primary school or comprehensive school, you'd probably see it as a mountain going up and down. This would also be classed as a linear story arc, which follows everything from an opening to the middle and then down to the ending. Now next up would be the script. Now the script is probably the most crucial part of this film. Now script is probably the biggest piece of pre-production throughout this whole project, because you've got to understand that you have to give whatever is in your vision to the crew by dialogue. You have to tell them about the story, about what is being said at that time, what style are we going to be aiming for. Every script has a breakdown, and one of these breakdowns, which is the most crucial part of the film, is the audio breakdown. Audio breakdown has to let the actor know about what is happening on this project, what is happening on that specific scene. So it could be, for example, there's a gunshot. You won't be able to hear the gunshot because probably the gunshot will be in the post-production section later on. But they've got to react like a gunshot is going off and give the reactions that they would. Usually for a script, every 1 page of that script is equated to 1 minute of the project. Let's say I could be doing a 40-minute project. Let's say I'm doing a 40-minute film, for example. I've got to print off 41 pages, including the front cover. So it's going to be a lot to think about when planning a project like this. 40 pages for one film. It's going to be a bit tricky. But then you have people like Scorsese, who did The Irishman with no problem, and that film was around 3+ hours long. So there's me complaining right there about something little in the media world. Storyboard. Storyboard lets you pitch your vision by imagery to your crew, to what you want as a project. On every storyboard, there are usually 6 images on one storyboard. So if I would put my project first, it would be around 30 pages. If my maths is correct, estimately for this project, 6 times 30 equals 180, which would mean I would make around 180 shots for this project. Now that might seem a lot, but like I said before, some of the biggest directors like Tarantino or Scorsese, they go through a lot more for their films. They would probably go through 500, maybe even more to 1,000 for their film, depending on how long it is. The shot list for the project is basically the same as storyboard, but it's all text. You explain by detail what you want. Like scene 1, shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, shot 4, scene 2, shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, shot 4, and so on and so forth. And usually as well, you can define of where you want this shot. You could have it internally, like I am here right now, filming in my room, and also filming externally, like I have with some of the Wes Anderson projects, which I will show you right now. These shots can be split up into different scenes, and usually for one scene, it can usually equate up to 8 shots, usually, based around my previous projects, of course. Now we have to cast the characters for this film. Now, casting the characters is probably one of my favourite parts of doing pre-production, because you want to point out who is going to be that person to fill this role on screen. In my film, there are 9 characters altogether. I will start from the minor characters all the way to the top tier for this film. I'll start off with 4 people for this project, and that is going to be William, the dealer, who is going to be played by Rhys Bird, and the 3 characters that passed away in that Pulp Fiction-like scene at the beginning. John, Jimmy and Chris. Chris is played by Armin Rahman, Jimmy is played by Joe Morris, and John is played by Caleb Mills for this project. I feel that Rhys Bird for this film, the role I gave him is that I could give it to someone who is good at being quiet. He can really fill that role out on the character, where he can just be standing there with the coin in hand, giving it over with absolutely no dialogue as well. He can also be mischievous as well for this project, very sneaky, because we don't see him until the big problem of this film. So I feel Rhys can be very suitable for that side of the project, with the role of Joe Morris in this project. He's playing Jimmy, of course. Jimmy seems to be a psycho, and sometimes when I've seen Joe in class, he can be a bit crazy at times, and it obviously helps with his hair down as well, because he can really play that off to be looking like a big psycho for this film. He can be shouting whatever he wants in that film. He can shout, he can swear as much as he can during that little cameo where he is shooting and missing the shots, of course. So I feel Joe is very capable of that that side of the project. With Armin's role, I thought that Armin's role in this film, I felt he can play two characters which were in Pulp Fiction at the same time. He can be both Marvin.
It's over there.
I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
And obviously the person that's laying on the couch in Pulp Fiction before he is shot. He can open the door, play as Marvin, and then what he can do, he can just go back and just sit down and lay down on the couch before he is shot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
So I feel Armin could be suited for that role. The reason I went for Caleb Mills to play John in this project was that John really plays off the feeling as a character who can bottle it on a big situation. He tries to cover everything up by playing innocent and knowing nothing about this deal. But then as soon as Chris is shot and shot dead, he starts shivering. I feel Caleb could suit that role because an innocent character who just like bottles it under pressure and starts shaking like mad.
I think it's actually a really interesting role. I always really like to play characters who kind of have like secrets and, you know, things that they're having to keep to themselves, and even though the audience watching knows that, the other characters don't know it until later on in the film or whatever. So I think that's really interesting. So yeah, it's just really interesting to play a character who kind of has, you know, secrets or whatever. So I personally really like the idea of recreating scenes, like taking scenes from old films and, you know, kind of rearranging them to create your own scene. I think that's a really good thing to do as like a producer. When you do that, you already have a format, if you like an idea of where the story is going to go. You just then have to develop it, I guess, and make it your own. But yeah, I think that's a really good thing to do because it also opens up so many opportunities, like where you can take the story, you know, it kind of just naturally brings a lot more ideas to you, which I also think is really... I don't think I would change anything, really. I think the way it's described is really well detailed, and I don't know, I think it's really interesting because, like, my character John, like, he is, I guess you could say, a really key part of the film, like, in terms of the storyline, but he's also quite short-lived, and I think that's quite interesting because even though this character is somewhat important, it kind of just goes to show that, like, you know, once the enemies, if you like, find out what they need to know, then that's it, and that character is no longer necessary, I guess. So it is a really, again, an interesting role, and no, I don't think I would change anything with my role.
Next up, we have the pony in the middle of this whole project. We have Dan, who can be portrayed by David Teague. David Teague can really play off that, do you trust him, do you not trust him? That's what people could have about Dan in this project. He can give up all the evidence he can for the Maguire family, but then on the other end, he is quite close to Frank Palmer. So it's like, you know, it's a mix of two worlds. I feel Dav could really play that off well, being both a good guy and a bad guy at the same time, being innocent and then guilty. So I thought David Teague would really suit that role very well. I was very close, in fact, to switching the roles of William and Dan around of the cast. I would have had David Teague to play as William, and I would have had Reese to play as Dan. But I decided in the end, after careful consideration between the two characters and the two people, I thought that David Teague would play better as Dan and Reese would play better as William. And now the main four in this film. We have Frank Palmer, who's played by Gareth Salvador, and we have Tony Maguire, who is played by Nathan Jenkins. These two people are big, powerful people. Within something like that, they could make a decision which will be changing the whole story of the film. That's how powerful Frank Palmer and Tony Maguire are. And I feel the roles of Nathan Jenkins getting the Tony Maguire role and Frank Palmer being given to Gareth Salvatore. I thought that was perfect because these are two powerful people with good mindsets of each other.
I was really happy about it. I wanted to do it, especially a big mob boss. I feel like that's my dream role in any film. So when you came and approached me about it, I felt very excited to be a part of it. Like when I saw the script and everything, I was very happy about it. I have a few gripes about it, but nothing major. I do like the way I am killed off. It's something that's gone wrong over a coin. It was like the scene in general. I really enjoyed. It was just I'd like it to be a bit more further into the film instead of midway. I would like it to be, there's an exclamation point. I would like it to be about at least 65, so 70% of the way through the film. So we get a bit more invested into the characters and then just kill them off. But other than that, it's more of the timing. But I do like the way I was killed off. It's just the timing around it seemed a bit off.
Of the two main characters of the film, which we have Ethan Beale playing David Mawson, and then we have Stephen Hall playing Leon Andrews. I felt that looking throughout my time in college, that Stephen Hall and Ethan Beale would suit this project very well, being the main two cast members, because how they push each other to a certain extent for a project. How do you feel being the lead role in this movie?
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to show certain skills as well, acting skills, but obviously that won't happen now, but also working with all the other actors, Gareth, Nathan, Ethan, especially Ethan, us being together would be kind of cool.
I like it. Gives me a chance to see how good my acting is and experiment with how the film would work. I like the idea of it, so be good fun.
How does it feel that your friendship with Stephen Hall is being brought in this film as you work together as two of the main characters of this film?
I think it's good. We have that natural chemistry that is, because we've been mates for 2 years now. So we've already got that natural chemistry, which I think would easily come on screen, because even if we mess up a line, we can just roll off it, because we know each other well enough to be able to do that. So I think it works.
The characters might have, competition, and in real life we have competition, we joke around, and we're good mates in real life, and I think we'd be able to portray that in the film as well if we're putting on the scene for you. So I think it's a really good idea that you put together two people who are good friends to portray good friends, because it'll show what's off camera, on camera, because we already have good chemistry and stuff. So it's very good choicing who we've picked.
Do you like the ending of this movie, and what would you change?
I like the ending. It's a good twist, but I would probably change it from Frank saying shoot through me. I would probably just have that without it and just my character think of that himself, because if he's switching families, he doesn't really have loyalty anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So if he thought of it himself, it's more like he's a lone wolf in it. But that's probably all I would change about that. It's a decent ending. It's a decent plot. I quite like it.
It could be really done well with, me getting the phone call and then me heading down to the clubhouse. It'd be really good to see how you're going to gel that all together with me killing Frank, and then how David's going to come in and sort it all out.
Do you reckon you could have been killed off instead of David? Because there was a choice between you two.
Nah, it's it always works with how the movie's flowing, really, isn't it? So if you're watching it and you like one character over another, you can always do some spins. It would be interesting to see if David killed the main character and see how everyone felt about that. Would have been kind of cool.
I've seen Stefan act before, and I feel that Stefan really could play the role well as Leon Andrews, as the main guy that survives at the end of the film. While I feel like with Ethan can also bring that in as well and push Stefan more, and Stefan would push Ethan more as well by finding out who would play better as the main character of this film. You really have the choice here of deciding whose story do you want to follow the most, David Mawson or Leon Andrews. Now these 9 people who I have just said, Bashir, they will all have to sign a release form. A release form is something which gives permission from them to use them into a project on a certain day, at a certain location, and for this project, of course. I gave 9 out altogether, and I have received 9 back, which I will show right now. Joe Morris, Kayla Mills, Armin Rahman, Reese Bird, David Teague, Gareth Salvador, Nathan Jenkins, Ethan Beale, and Stephen Hall. Now it's time for location recce. Right, about this, location recce would give you all the ideas of what's happening at a certain location. It would say what is good about the area, what's the best shots for this area, why do you think this will benefit you for this project. But this is different this year because obviously I can't do that. Because of the coronavirus, I can't travel to something that's not essential for me to do, to try and get footage for you to look at this location. So unfortunately I couldn't do that. But it's not much because there's only 2 locations for this project that I was going to plan to do. And the first location was obviously going to be Neath Talbot College. Now Neath Talbot College, I would have used around 2 or 3 rooms, which was the main studio room. I would have used that for the Pulp Fiction scene with Calum, Joe and Armin. ND145, I would have used that as an example of the meetup between Leon, David Mawson and Tony Maguire in the room when they meet for the first time. And ND103, I was planning to use this as a location for the end part of the film, where I would use the negotiation scene between Leon Andrews, David Mawson and Frank Palmer, which would turn out to be the biggest plot twist in the film. I would also use outside of the college as well, because when the chase scene is happening, I plan to use the main car park of the college to start the chase scene, run all the way round, and then where we filmed the old post-apocalypse film, that is where the scene culminated with David Mawson tackling Dan onto the floor. And the other big location that I had planned was an abandoned warehouse in Britain Ferry. As you can see from this article from Wales Online, this warehouse has been abandoned with no buyer for nearly 80 years. That's a long time. I know going into this project that people would have filmed there before, I know Dan Thomas filmed there for his music videos, so I asked him of what he would advise me to do if I was going to this location, and he told me just to take a certain amount of people if possible. And I think the most people I would have in a scene would be around 5 people. After discussing with Dan Thomas about the location and looking at the imagery of this project, I decided, yes, I will use this location, and this could work out as either an interrogation scene or the warehouse meetup. I asked some of my cast about the location at the warehouse, and this is what they have to say. Do you like the choice of location that I chose for this project?
I really like it. It's urban. It gives that sort of dark, grungy, gringy sort of horrid vibe that I think will make your film pop.
Well, it's interesting choices, Very good choices, especially the band at the warehouse. It looks very cool. You could definitely get some really good shots.
I really did. With some of them I felt they were quite good. Some I didn't really like. For an example, picture 1 had nice graffiti, a nice open area. You got some trees in the background. It's a quite nice area for a drug deal or mafia style dealings to go down in. But pictures 3 and 4 I wasn't really happy with, especially with suits and everything. We could get them damaged, or they could be torn or something like that, and suits are very expensive. You don't want them to get damaged. Other things can be useful for. So pictures 2, very nice. That seemed like a nice drive-up scene, if you know what I mean. Something to approach the area with. And yeah, that's mainly what I think of these areas. They looked very nice. I wouldn't mind this, but we could get something like a more posher area type thing, which would have been made a mix of nice and bad areas.
Now, it's the prop list and the budget. Now, for this project, these 2 would come together for me because I'd be in charge on what to buy for this project, who is given the props. For example, David Mawson would have a gun, Frank Palmer would have a gun, Leon Andrews would have a gun, and Tony Maguire would have a gun. And so would Jimmy as well, for that scene when he's shooting in his apartment. I set myself a price, just in case for this project, of £50. If everything doesn't go as well, I asked Dan Thomas if I could borrow some equipment for the project, like some handguns or shotguns, for example. He said he was okay with it, so if we were ever filming, that would be saving a lot of money there for that project. I would also have to buy a coin for the project, because no one I know going into this film has a very special coin. So I've decided to look online to look at some coins, and there is a short list there I have looked at, and I feel like I would get this classic 1800s coin Bashir, which costs around £40. I'm okay spending that, so don't worry. I could become a coin collector one day, so who knows. Now, risk assessment. Risk assessment is probably by far the most important thing for any job out there. It's not just production, it's not just a media project, it's for any job out there in the world. You need to look at the risk assessment of what you're going into. Now, I've taken the Neath Talbot Risk Assessment Guide Bashir, and they've marked it by a times table. Now, you're in green Bashir, for example, you're in between 1 and 8. So that would mean that you should be able to go ahead with any production possible. Now, if the project is in the orange section, between 9 and 16, then it is still under control, but I would need further controls to prevent an incident from happening. 17 to 25 means that this should not go ahead at all. All that would be marked by a times table. By how dangerous the risk is, like the likelihood of that happening, and what are the repercussions for that person going ahead. So if it's 5 times 5, this is certain to happen, there's a likelihood of it, and what is the outcome? Death. That is 25. That should definitely not go ahead at all. If it's like 2 times 2, not likely, but a minor injury, then that means that it's a 4, so that means the project would go ahead as planned. My project would probably fall under the 1 to 8 section because of previous work that has been done there. It has been deemed safe by other people that have worked there before, probably up to a high 7 or 8 though, because that could obviously change no matter what could happen. There is a risk, but it's not as bad of a risk. It can be under control if you listen to people who have been there multiple times. Character design. These make the characters point out who are the main guys of this film and who are the bad guys. For Caleb, Joe and Armin, they could be wearing their normal college uniform, their normal college clothing, which is usually like a grey sweater or a jacket, maybe a hat on Joe as well. Who knows? They want to wear whatever they want for that day. They can go ahead with whatever. By the look on their faces, John and Chris needs to look innocent throughout this project, to really give up that idea that they are trying to play it one way before Chris is shot and John starts shaking. Jimmy's character, Joe's character, who is Jimmy, is someone who usually turns up late for the show. When he has a gun in hand, he can be serious, if he's not missing, of course. But...
Die, you motherfucker!
Reese's character, William the dealer, is a shady character who can be suited up for the big occasion. He does have a massive briefcase on him, but in this briefcase is that one little coin that everyone is dreaming about. William is intelligent and he knows how to settle a score. This would make him dependable when it comes to something like a negotiation scene. The Frank Palmer and the Tony Maguire characters, I decided that their characters should be deemed as, because I want to try and make this feel like Neath Talbot as much as I can. Instead of feeling like this is New York, Kansas City or something like that, I would rather decide that this is Neath Talbot, we wear what we want. So I decided for that to be a better outcome. And if they want to throw some Welsh slang into their project, go ahead, because this would really deem this as a South Wales mafia project. Leon Andrews, of course, is a cold-hearted killer. His character, he was brought into this to get a job done as much as he can, to try and make more money from the Maguire's family as much as possible. But if an incident is so severe, he can have a meltdown. He can have a meltdown no matter what room he is in. When I mean a meltdown, he can just start drinking constantly most of the day throughout the project. And David Mawson is this person who just changes the story inside out. David Mawson has long fringe hair down, and he was once friends with Leon Andrews by the end of this project. But the reality, like I said before, in real life, Leon Andrews and David Mawson, they are played by Stephen Hall and Ethan Beale. These two can really play off each other and really get the best out of each other for a film, so that they can tell their own story ahead. Both characters can wear the casual uniforms. As like I said before about the Frank Palmer and Tony Maguire situation, I want to make this feel like Wales. I wanted to feel like this is Neath Talbot and not the US. And now to finish off the video, we're going to be talking about equipment. Equipment is one of the most important assets you need for a film, as whatever you're using is pivotal for recording for that day. And first off, for equipment, we're going to be taking a Canon camera, DSLR, and then we're going to be using the 4K camera to record most of this film. This Canon camera can be used mainly just for photography, for cinematography mainly. Obviously you can upgrade the lens, of course. A 15mm lens would be best preferable for this. For sure, I have the Rode microphone, which I will use as part of the boom mic for this project. And I also have the Tascam for sure, which for audio, as this is the most important part of the film, so it picks up on everything. Then we have our trusty headphones, which we can use for the production, to hear anything wrong with the audio or something like that. We also got to consider a boom mic as well. I don't have a boom mic on me, unfortunately. We got to think about a charging kit as well. If the camera runs out, for example, we need to change that battery as soon as possible so we can get more recording done. And obviously all paperwork that we've done in pre-production ready for production, as that'll be risk assessment, prop list, budget, shot list, storyboard, script. All these would need to come together so you are ready for filming. Because if you don't have one of these, including location recce as well, your production could potentially be ruined for that day, and that could be wasting people's time for that day. And that's a wrap for today. I would go further into this, into production and post-production, but unfortunately I can't do production because of the coronavirus. It is not an essential thing for me to do, to leave the house to record a production project, and it would be quite hard to do, especially with the guidelines that we've been put through as well. So I hope everyone stays safe. I hope everyone likes the idea that I've got this year. A South Wales mafia style thriller. What a ride this is going to be. Okay, stay safe now. Bye bye.